Fluent in 3 months, Brandon Sung.
I remember the first time I wanted to learn a language. I think it was German, back in school. It didn't work out so well. I lost motivation, and I thought it was too hard. Wind back time to about roughly now. I guess you could say I could speak Cantonese, but that's about it. But I've learned another language. Fellow Toastmasters. A couple of years ago, I ran into a TED talker named Benny Lewis, who was a polyglot. And he kept talking about how hard it was, or at least how hard it was for him to learn languages. But he made a remark saying, it doesn't have to be that hard, because there's always those constant myths out there that it's so hard to learn a language. After watching the whole entire TED Talk, I got inspired to learn languages again. The one thing he specifically said about fluency is that it does not mean perfection. I mean, we have a grammarian back there who's going to probably count how many times I say or I make a grammatical mistake out there. And that's okay, because do you know what? You understand what I'm trying to say, and that's the point of languages, is being able to communicate. And thus, I joined a challenge roughly around December last year to learn Cantonese in 90 days. And the winner of this challenge would get a round trip to a place where they speak the language of what they are learning in. So for me, it would be Hong Kong or Guangdong in China. So I would like to use this opportunity to inform you about my methods and what I've learned from participating in this challenge. So the number one thing is probably the most important thing, is motivation. Why do you want to learn this language? And probably the single worst motivator is because it's cool. Sure, it's cool to learn a language, but is it tangible? Can you really do something with saying, is it cool to learn language? I mean, if you go ask somebody about why they learn a language, they often give you, oh, because I want to speak to my parents, my grandparents. I want to go to that country. For me, it's because I want to learn more martial arts. And the problem is, my master currently does not actually speak a word of English. So I actually have to communicate with him in that language. And the first time I talked to him was like, as Cantonese people like to say, like the chicken talking to the duck. They don't understand each other. So what's a good motivator? What drives you to learn a language? That will help you keep going, and it will constantly remind you as you keep going through the challenge of learning in 90 days. Secondly is resources. This one's kind of difficult, especially if you're learning a language that doesn't have very many resources. But also on the flip side, you could also be learning Spanish and you have a tidal wave of resources, but you're not sure where to start. So what I've learned from Benny Lewis is phrase books. Know why? Because phrase books have some good vocabulary, but they also teach you very basic grammar, so at least you can start talking with whatever is in these phrase books. They talk to you about even the cultural aspects and even the very basic things you need to learn about, maybe manners, cultural insight, and probably get you more interested in the language. Secondly, in resources, is finding a schedule. You need to find time every day. Now, I know a lot of us are really busy with their lives, and it'd be really hard to sit down, study flashcards, study how to write the character for sky in Chinese. It sounds really boring. But it doesn't have to be. I mean, you could substitute some of the study time with a movie. You don't have to actively know what you're talking about, but you have to at least be able to listen to the language, so at least after a while you get attuned to what they're saying. Or you just do the really bad stuff on your commute home. Say you're taking the train, or maybe it sounds a bit gross, but maybe you're sitting on the toilet and you have nothing to do. Why don't you take out your flashcards that you made on your phone? Just don't drop it in the toilet. Or it might be in a worse situation anywhere. And lastly, start speaking now. This is probably the hardest thing to do because of diffidence. But the thing is, very few people really get angry at you for attempting to learn a language. For example, I remember going to a Dairy Queen once, and I overheard the server speaking Korean. So I decided to diffidently say "감사합니다" when I was saying thank you. You wouldn't believe how happy they were to hear that. They kept speaking to me as if I was a fluent speaker, but I was like, I'm sorry, but I don't understand Korean. Maybe I'll learn someday. Then I'll be able to speak to you. And that's the thing about learning languages, is you have to have fun with it. Remember that we all make mistakes. I mean, the other day when I spoke Cantonese, instead of tour guide, I accidentally said drug dealer. And I didn't even know that until somebody corrected me. But that's the thing. It doesn't matter. Even when we were young, when we were learning English, I still remember the last time when I was like 5 years old, I told my mom, are we going to Bank of Money instead of Bank of Montreal? We all learn from mistakes, and these mistakes help us to understand and have fun with the language